I would like, having said this, I would like to offer the floor to Lavinia BANU, who is Policy Assistant on Non-discrimination Policy and Roma Coordination at DG Justice. Please.
First of all, I would like to thank very much the organizers for the invitation. I will need to apologize from the very beginning for my voice. I'm fighting a very, very bad cold. But in case I'm not being understood, please feel free to stop me at any point. My name is Lavinia BANU. I work at the European Commission in DG Justice and Consumers in a unit which is called Non-discrimination Policies and Roma Coordination Unit. To be more exact, I work in the Roma Coordination Unit, where we basically coordinate all the initiatives on Roma issues at the level of the European Commission. So basically, we work very closely with the other DGs such as Employment, Regio, EAC, Sante, and so on. Given the topic of the conference, I will very shortly present you the very general EU legislation on minorities, which is not actually my area of expertise, but it's, per se something that we all should know. And then since, I'm working on Roma issues, I will present what we do at the level of the European Commission on Roma policies. First of all, the respect for the rights of the minorities is one of the core values of the European Union, which is explicitly mentioned under Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union. The European Commission is actually very committed to fighting anti-discrimination at all levels, and in doing that we have a concrete EU legislation. More concretely, I'm referring here to the Racial Equality Directive and also to the Employment Directive. In addition to that, and this is also somehow linked to what I've heard to the presentation from Georgia, that our colleague here was telling us that they don't really have the means to fight hate speech. Well, at the European level, we have the framework decision on combating xenophobia and racism and also hate speech through the framework decision from 2008. And since the entry into force of the Lisbon Treaty, starting with last year, the European Commission can actually launch infringement procedures against the member states when it comes to these areas. Very important to mention here, when it comes to the minorities, I have to highlight that the Commission has no general power over issues relating to the recognition of status of minorities or on the use of minorities' languages. Member states are competent to determine the legal status of national minorities, including the recognition of linguistic rights in accordance with Article 51 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights. This is more or less also the situation when it comes to Roma issues. The Commission has worked a lot on Roma policy, but basically member states have the main responsibility and the competence in addressing the challenges of the Roma citizens within the territory of their member states. I will start briefly to explain to you. Sorry for that. How the process on Roma issues actually started in the European Commission more actively, because we have always, tackled Roma issues, but since 2011, we have adopted what is called a new framework for national Roma integration strategies. What does it mean? The EU framework for national Roma integration strategies called on the member states to implement and to submit national Roma integration strategies focused on 4 key main areas: education, employment, health, and housing. All of them interlinked with the cross-cutting issues on anti-discrimination. The reason for which we have initiated this EU framework is not because of the ethnic background per se, but it's because of the high level of discrimination towards Roma people, and also because of the very high level of poverty Roma people are facing within the member states. Now, following the EU framework on national Roma integration strategies, indeed all the member states have submitted national Roma integration strategies, except for Malta. For obvious reasons, I think according to our data, they only have 3 Roma citizens. Okay, so they indeed submitted national Roma integration strategies. And in addition to that, we also asked the member states to appoint a national Roma contact point, whose role is to supervise and to monitor the national Roma integration process at the national level. In addition to this, the Commission monitors the assessment of the national and assesses the process Roma issues at the national level. And it's annually it issues reports, assessment reports. Every year there are somehow, on different topics. For instance, this year, because of the opportune timing, we also assessed how the member states have linked the national, the Roma issues with the EU funding for 2014-2020. We also looked at how the measures they implemented on addressing the anti-discrimination, more specifically anti-gypsyism at the national levels. We also looked at the measures they have put in place for making the coordination bodies more effective in addressing, the challenges of Roma issues at the level of the member states. Yes, this report was adopted on 17 June this year. Very important to know is that in 2013, we adopted the Council recommendation specifically on Roma issues. We call this soft legislation. This actually enforces the European Commission and also the EU framework, which was adopted in 2011. It specifically, addresses the anti-discrimination measures. It also addresses which is an aspect which was not so, concretely covered by EU framework. It addresses the situation of the Romani women and children. It addresses the situation of local authorities and how much local authorities are involved, in addressing the challenges at the local level. Yes. What I would like also to tell you is that we meet regularly with the National Roma Contact Point Network. Basically, we meet 2 times per year. In fact, the next mission is going to take place on the 19th and 20th of October, so very, very shortly. Maybe it's important to mention that we do consider that the European level, we have put in place everything. We have a very complex mechanism which contains financial tools, legal tools, and also a very concrete policy area on Roma issues. Now, our priority is to go local. In line with that, we organize regular bilateral with the member states. Since I'm working on Romania, I would like to mention that we have just organized a high-level bilateral meeting with the Romanian government, but because of our priority, we somehow structure the high-level bilateral in a very different way, in the sense that we also take time and we go the local level and we visit communities. In Romania, so far, we visited 17 Roma communities in almost 5 counties. And but also we meet civil society organization. We consider that having all the relevant stakeholders involved in the process is one of the key solutions which needs to be, taken into account when it comes to Roma issues, and not only to Roma issues, but in general. In order to address better the challenges at the local level, directly from Brussels, we are trying to support the process at the local level. In doing that, we help the member states through a direct funding from Brussels to organize national platforms. And we also we have just launched a tender in which we support the capacity building of 19 Roma NGOs Europe-wide. But also we help them to, train them to access better the EU funding, because we know that this is more or less a challenge at the level of the member states. Yes, so this is basically what we do at the European level at this stage. I would like also to mention that we do not address the Roma issues only in the specific context of the EU framework, but we also do it in the European semester. And as a result of our involvement in the European semester, we already have 5 member states with country-specific recommendations: Romania, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. Moreover, I think you all know that we have just recently launched infringement procedures towards Czech Republic and Slovakia for discrimination of segregation, basically, of Roma children in their schools. In addition to that, we very closely monitor the situation in the member states, and we do have, we are still investigating other member states, but I'm not at liberty to discuss ongoing investigation at this point, but I think you'll hear very, very soon about our outcomes. And yes, yeah, this was more or less what I wanted to say, but I'm here, and please feel free to ask any questions you would like me to answer to. Just with a very short mentioning that I'm not a legal person. I do not work on legal issues in the European Commission. Like I said, it's more or less a policy approach. But in case there will be questions which I will not be able to answer, I would very gladly take notes and direct them to my colleagues, and definitely I will come back with an answer to all of you in writing. Thank you very much.
If there are any questions and comments, please raise your hands, give me a sign, and we will start discussion. So far, no questions. Okay, you might still think about this, but I have some questions, which I have to confess that I don't understand entirely. But I would like to ask you to clarify certain things. For instance, the infringement procedure which was mentioned. This was it's an interesting mechanism which is applied when certain EU country, as I understand, does not comply with the legislation, EU legislation adopted. What is the result so far, and can we think about importing such mechanism to the Eastern Partnership countries, or it's too early for this kind of steps? And also I like the question which you mentioned when you said we don't need to think only, we don't need only to conclude that certain things don't work, but we need to understand why these things don't work, because otherwise we are not able to find the proper solution. And you mentioned also the directives on anti-discrimination, and whether, my question is again whether we can take some of these directives. I don't know whether in the association agreement these countries Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova are obliged to take certain directives or not. But we need to check this. So maybe you have comments on this, on infringement procedure, and maybe on the Kalman on the directives. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I was actually expecting a question on this. As you know, EU legislation needs a clear transposition of it's in line with the treaties. Then the member states they are obliged to transpose the EU legislation at the national level. When we have a clear indicator that the EU legislation has been breached by the member states, only then we can launch an infringement procedure. As I told you, the infringement procedures for Czech Republic and for Slovakia are still ongoing, so we are not really at liberty to discuss the details of the investigations. But what I can tell you is, for instance, that for Czech Republic, they have committed to some measures, and we are actually at the monitoring phase when we want to see whether it's going to happen or not. And for Slovakia, I'm not going to comment because this is quite recent, so we don't want to share details at this stage. For you to, if I can say, to import a little bit from what we do here at the European level, I'm not really sure what sorts of mechanism you can put in place to do that. Definitely, I think it should be, I'm not that familiar with what you do first event on this sense, but then again, it has to be done at the member states, at the country national level, I mean. And then I think that will take a great amount of work from, again, NGOs and civil society to lobby for that. But yeah, I think it would be a good thing in this sense.
We have 4 questions and comments, please. Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Andrei Brigidin, member of the Moldovan Equality Body. I have a question for Lavinia. Lavinia, from the height of the institution that you represent, I am curious, I would like you to substantiate a bit how you are cooperating with civil society organizations in the region, but also with the equality bodies in the region, and more specifically with the equality bodies in the Eastern Partnership region. What do you think is being done and should be done in order to strengthen that cooperation? Thank you.
My name is Robert Chata. I come from the Central European University. And for Lavinia, also a question of clarification, maybe. You said, and as far as I know as well, it's most of the EU legislation is soft power, so to say, but then you concentrated on the infringement procedure, which would be very hard, I would say, right? So, and at the same time, you also claim that in order to move forward on these issues, you now try to move local, so that you go onto the ground. And I'm curious, again, in at the level of the DG maybe that you work in, so what is the direction that you really think works then? So maybe more strict implementation of those legal norms through really hard legal procedures such as the infringement, or do you really think that it is going onto the local ground and maybe, again, together with Kalman's idea, bringing up a local community that is aware of issues will be more successful in solving this issue? Thank you.
I will start by answering to the question coming from Andrei, how we involve civil society in our process. This was the first one, and then the one with the equality body. Since the beginning, when we started with the EU framework or national Roma integration strategies, this is a very complex process, and we involved all the relevant stakeholders from the very beginning, such as civil society, international organizations, member states, European institutions. We have this annual European Roma platform, where we bring all the relevant people together, and it's a very good process because it's an exchange of practices, good practices, where people have the forum to speak about their challenges. The next one will be organized in 2016, second quarter of the year. And then coming to, we also involve the civil society in our reporting mechanism. As I told you, every year we issue an assessment report. It's actually a communication. And the way we are doing this on our website, we have a standard template, a questionnaire, which we circulate with the member states, but also civil society organizations. They have access to it. So most of the times we receive inputs from all over Europe, from all over the civil society organizations. And we don't really rely only on the inputs we receive from the member states, but we also compare the data we receive with the inputs from the civil society organizations. Coming back to the equality bodies, if I'm not mistaken, we coordinate in DG Justice the equality body networks. Unfortunately, we do not really follow, at least in DG Justice, the equality bodies involved in the Easter Partnership. So I'm not really aware of that. But when it comes to the equality body, for instance, when we launch infringement procedures, most of the time we also contact them and we inquire, an analysis on the situation on the ground, and then we compare this with the data we receive with the information we receive from the member states. But this would be like a first step, for us to know what's the situation concretely at the national level. We do get in touch with the equality bodies from the respective member state. And then the second question, with the EU legislation, I think you misunderstood me when I said about the soft legislation. That was only for the Council recommendation, which were issued in 2013. But I think we all know that we have the treaties and the directive, which are legally binding for all the member states. Hence the reason for which we can actually launch infringement procedures, because they are legally binding. And when I mentioned the local priority, that's specifically on Roma issues on the EU framework, because we have started in 2011, and the whole process is until 2020. So basically, we have reached now this level, as I said, when we have everything in place. We have the policies, we have the legal tools, we have the financial tools. So obviously, we are now focusing on the local level, because it's there where the change, must be done, and not at the European level. In fact, my head of unit has a very nice saying. She says, the national Roma integration strategies will not be implemented in Brussels, in our offices, nor in the office of the Prime Minister in Bucharest or whatever, but at the local level. Hence the reason for which we push so much. And we support the member states in achieving this difference and the concrete, tangible results on Roma issues. I think I tackled the questions.
Hello, my name is Louise Metrich from Tom Lantos Institute, Budapest. I have a question. So far, it seems to me that we talked mostly about anti-discrimination, and especially at the individual level, but the topic was also the relation with minority rights. So I would be interested in making this, this link between anti-discrimination and minority rights, such as either cultural rights, but also right to self-determination or political participation. And if you could address more this topic, because to me it seems that this was the core question of the panel. Thank you.
So who would like to start first?
As I said from the beginning, this is not actually my area of expertise. What I can say at this stage is everything related to minorities, even if it's regarding the languages, the culture, or whatever, it lies within the competencies of the member states. At the EU level, what we can do is to guide the process, but the actual competencies and the responsibility are within the member states. Thank you.
We have 2 or 3 minutes until the lunch, so I think if there are no other questions or comments. No other questions and comments, then I would like to conclude this on this panel, and I think indeed some of the issues maybe were not raised as the last question was mentioning. However, some of the issues are very, sometimes I can tell you from my experience in Ukraine or in Moldova that if you raise the issue about self-determination of minority, it becomes a real big problem, because there are some grounds which led to not very positive experiences in these regions, in these areas. So it has to, we need to take this question not, well, mainly from the perspective of theory, let's say, in terms of self-determination, because it's a very dangerous question, especially to be raised in some of the Eastern Partnership countries that have conflicts on their regions. While mentioning other issues which were discussed in the panel, I think we have several conclusions which were naturally born after this discussion. And one of this is that, here's the mention that we need to end. One of these conclusions is that the role of civil society is quite important in the steering debates about the anti-discrimination policy and minority rights, and to train maybe to facilitate the training for the judiciary, for police. I remember when the visa liberalization process was taking place in Moldova, there was a special training designed for police with an accent on human rights, so police knows how to deal with the issue when someone addresses them and says, I was discriminated, for instance. And most of the police, they didn't know what they can do, basically. So they were trained how to file, in a way, complain about discrimination and so on. And maybe one thing for the future would be, why doesn't DG Justice maybe consider cooperation with equality bodies in the Eastern Partnership countries? Maybe it would be an opportunity to transfer the experience. I think that the question of Andrei was somehow directed into this perspective. But yeah, so I would like to thank you, the speakers, for their presentations, and the audience for their input. And yeah, I'm passing the floor to Zofia.